up, Chargers fans? Welcome back to the God of Thunder podcast. It is Raiders week. The Chargers are taking on the dumpster fire of the Raiders, and it is officially the battle of the mids. Man, what a crazy 7 days we've just had. Justin Herbert out for the season. Easton Stick filling in. Man, a lot to discuss. I'm going to make this a quick, short video, though. So let's jump right into a segment that I'm creating called Reality Check. I'm going to go over three things that I think we all, as Charger fans, have to come into terms with. And the first thing is that Justin Herbert is out for the season, and season is officially over. We are in tank mode, right? Justin Herbert officially had surgery this past Tuesday on his right index finger on his throwing hand. And in order to aid that and fully recovering, he's going to be out for the season, which is good for us and good for him, right? We don't want him to rush back from injury and basically re-aggravate that injury or make it worse or even, have permanent damage to it. So the fact that he's sitting out for the rest of the season is a good thing. Especially considering our playoff hopes are officially gone. We just lost to the Denver Broncos. We were 5-7, had the potential to be 6-7, and then jump right ahead of the Denver Broncos, but they beat us. They're 7-6. We're 5-8 and have no real shot at the playoffs. If there is a shot, it's got to be like 0.0001. So no real shot. Season's over. Season shot. And yeah, we're moving on to tanking and hopefully getting a better draft pick, right? So with that being said, the tanking consideration. Let's talk about my next point in reality check, and I think that is we could officially say that Tom Telesco and Staley are going to be out as far as Chargers leadership goes, right? Staley's been on the hot seat since last season, but with everything that he has not done this season and has not accomplished and has not done with the top 5 quarterback and the offensive and defensive weapons he's had, it's safe to say he's done as the Chargers head coach. And we're going to be looking for a new leader in our locker room next year. And then Tom Telesco, who's been our GM for the past 10 years, he's been good, right, in some ways, and he's been bad in others. I think where he's been good has been actually who he's drafted. He's drafted some really good players, if we're being honest, right? He's drafted Keenan Allen, Melvin Gordon, Joey Bosa, Hunter Henry, Mike Williams, Derwin James, Uchenna Nwosu, Drew Tranquil, obviously Justin Herbert, Alohi Gilman, Rashawn Slater, Asante Samuel Jr., Josh Palmer, Sawyer, Jasir Taylor, and then Tully and Davis in this most recent draft class. So he's had some really good picks. He's had bad picks. And DJ Fluker, Jason Verrett, who was a good cornerback, but he's just injury prone. Forrest Lamp, the worst pick in Charger history, in my opinion. Jerry Tillery, who's a freaking who we all seen made that hit on Justin Herbert at the beginning of the season. So he's just a bum. And then JT Woods, who we drafted last year, but hasn't seen the field, hasn't had any production. Zion Johnson last year, the jury's still out on Zion Johnson. We don't know how good he's going to be, but I think as far as like up until this point, the expectations we had, maybe the organization had, I don't think he's been performing to that level that we expected him to perform this year. And then our most recent first round draft pick in Quentin Johnston, who, like I said, super young, too early to tell whether or not he's going to be good or great. I think he's still way too young in his career. He has had the issues with the drop balls, but he did have that big catch against the Broncos for 52 yards. So hopefully that's a real turning point for him, and we could take him out of the consideration of him possibly being a bust because it's only beneficial if he is not a bust and he plays really well, especially with all the changes that are most likely going to be made next year because of Tom Telesco's front loading a lot of these contracts or back loading them. And it's going to set us up for a real tough cap year. And so just to kind of grade Tom Telesco on like his drafting, I think he's a solid B-. I think he's done well. Like you can't hit on every single draft pick unless you're the Philadelphia Eagles. So it's really hard to do to determine whether or not a player is going to be good in the NFL. And I think overall he's done an actually good job. But where he's lacked is actually putting together a roster. Prior to the Brandon Staley era, he didn't put rosters together that benefited like that coaching staff, whether it be Anthony Lynn or Mike McCoy. I don't think he ever did that. Like that's why he was considered coupon Tom, right? Because he never made like those big splash moves or like moves that would really be beneficial to our program. But with Brandon Staley, he actually did push all his chips to the table, and I think that was kind of him knowing that his reign as the GM or his tenure as the GM was coming to an end, and like him and Staley both have like did everything that they possibly could to win, which you got to appreciate. But at the same time, like it just didn't work. He had some huge misses in free agency, like J.C. Jackson. I don't think Sebastian Joseph Day or Austin Johnson have played to what we expected them to play, and all those players like were to fit Brandon Staley's scheme, and that's why I kind of mentioned that like he didn't really do that, but for Brandon Staley, he went out and got the players that Brandon Staley wanted, and you could tell like that was a coach and GM connection that they all made those decisions on. So it was all based off what Brandon Staley wanted, and it was a complete failure. I mean, if like the past 3 years, even though we went 10-7 last year, it's just been a complete failure on the defensive side of the ball. And Justin Herbert has made up for a lot of what has been lacking on the defense. And is really the only reason why the Chargers were in the playoffs last year, why the Chargers had even a shot the first year of Brandon Staley's tenure, and then why we won the games that we won this year, even though the defense actually played okay this year in some of those wins. So, like, the only good thing he's done in the Brandon Staley tenure was probably sign Khalil Mack, and that's the only bright spot that I could see. And it sucks to see right now because he's been such a consistent player for us, and he's having an all pro type of season that we're have a 5-8 record and are completely out of the playoffs. So it's unfortunate to see like us basically wasting one of Khalil Mack's like final years as like an elite edge rusher. Um, but moving on. So with that, with us being 5-8, with Justin Herbert out for the season, is it time for the root for the Chargers to lose? Is it time to go full tank mode? And I know I'll get a lot of pushback on it because I'm a Charger fan, but I want to see us get the set up for the best way possible for next year. I want us to be set up with the top 5 pick. I want us to have the ability to either draft a Marvin Harrison Jr. or the ability to trade back and acquire more draft capital. And I think that's the smart move. Smooth move. You can't tell players to not play hard, but at this point, what are they playing for? If not for their contracts and their well-being and possible signings for next year. But that's just a real. I don't know. I've never been on an NFL squad with a losing team, so I think at this point, if you listen to like a lot of talking heads who play in the NFL, at this point they're playing more for their contracts and their money and for next year, not necessarily for the team to win. And you don't really know like what's going on in the locker room, so that's just my opinion on it and how I see it. But we're currently in the ninth. We have the ninth worst record in the NFL right now, according to ESPN. So it puts us like top 10 draft pick right now. But if we do lose out, like I said, draft capital, right? That should be what we're focusing on right now, draft capital and acquiring more draft picks or acquiring an elite wide receiver like Marvin Harrison Jr. A lot of that's going to depend on who our next head coach is. And I say next head coach first before GM because the head coach, like what we're hearing right now as far as rumors go, Jim Harbaugh or Bill Belichick, when they come in, they're going to want to choose their GM or they're going to want to wear multiple hats and be the GM. So we don't know what's going to go on with the GM and we don't know what's going to go on with the head coach. But I'd imagine like with the people that are associated with the Chargers right now, it's going to be wait and see as far as the GM aspect comes in because they're going to want to pick their own GM or actually be that GM. So that was my 3 reality checks for this podcast and this segment. If you like it, let me know. I'm moving forward after this season. I'm going to get a little more creative, update my equipment, update everything, and then actually start streaming on like Spotify and some of those podcasting outlets. So more to come, right? It's just the first season. All right, going into the Raiders, just real quick recap on the Raiders. They're starting Aiden O'Connell, coming off a bad game, threw a pick, he had less than 200 yards. What was surprising in that game, Joshua Jacobs, their star running back, had like 38 yards on 13 carries. I don't expect that to carry over into this game against the Chargers, especially with our defense who's been struggling to stop the run. So I'd expect a heavy dose of Josh Jacobs in this next game on Thursday, especially with the new interim head coach, Antonio Pierce, who really made that an emphasis when he first became the interim head coach, is like running the football with Josh Jacobs. They kind of strayed away from that this last game. With that being said, I think they regroup and really utilize Josh Jacobs against our defense. And then we know they have Devontae Adams and Hunter Renfro. Hunter Renfro was real absent in the first time we played him, but this time around, I expect him to be more involved. Every time Devontae Adams and Hunter Renfro play against the Chargers, it's a bad day for us. Like Devontae Adams is obviously one of the most elite wide receivers in the NFL, and he absolutely cooks the Chargers for whatever reason. I mean, I've seen him cook Asante Samuel, Vato. Like it doesn't matter who's on him, he's gonna cook. And then Hunter Renfro is like really known for those like short outs. He's a really good route runner. So I expect him to have a decent game. But I think their main emphasis on the offensive side of the ball is to really get Josh Jacobs going and expose the Chargers defense. Defensively, they don't have much going on for them, right? I think they have one standout that we could talk about, and that's Max Crosby, who's an absolute dog. I'm a huge fan of Max Crosby and his ability, his bendability, his versatility, like everything he does, his mentality. And he's an absolute dog, and I think he's going to feast on a Chargers quarterback in Easton Stick who struggled last week to see the pass rush and who actually had two fumbles, one that was for a touchdown that somehow got called back. Not sure what happened in that whole sequence, but it got called back, and he was really struggling, especially Trey Pipkins. That's typically where Max Crosby lines up on the left side or on the right side offensively, and Trey Pipkins allowed free runners. He's been having a down year after what I would call like a decent year last year. So with Trey Pipkins playing on that side, if Kellen Moore can adjust this blocking scheme and really help Trey Pipkins with chipping or with putting an extra tight end over there, like it's going to be a long day for Easton Stick, and it's going to be a long day for us as Chargers fans because Max Crosby is going to absolutely eat. He's on the injury report, but I mean, I was listening to a podcast where he had to go to the hospital prior to the game because his whole knee was swollen, and somehow he miraculously played the next game and had 2 sacks. So I don't expect Max Crosby to miss this game, especially with it being a rivalry week where Chargers Raiders is always a good game to watch. And then they also have they let go of some cornerbacks. Their linebacking core is mediocre, and then their cornerback core, like I said, is mediocre. So I think it just comes down to how well our offensive line plays against their defensive line, and if they're able to eat like I expect them to, then like I said, it's going to be a long game. Moving on to the Chargers, right? First off, we got Easton Stick at quarterback. Keenan Allen's on the injury report. We have Joshua Palmer returning from IR. But Staley already said this week that he's not going to see a full workload because he's just coming off IR, just coming off injury. They're going to work him and give him a small workload. If Keenan Allen does not play, then Quentin Johnston's going to be our wide receiver one, and we're going to see a lot of Darius Davis and Erickson, which, in my opinion, is a good thing, right? Season's over. We're not making the playoffs. What we need to do is see what our young players are going to be able to do for us this year and going into next year, right? Because if Darius Davis is like a legit wide receiver, which I think he has the potential to be, then let's get him going and let's see what he could do in this offense. If Quentin Johnston is going to hopefully see a turnaround after a decent game, which he had his highest receiving yards against the Broncos, like let's see that happen right now. And if we want to get Isaiah Spiller going, like let's let him carry the ball, right? He played pretty decent last game, minus like a loss for 2 or 3 yards, where the gap closed real quick and he had to bounce it outside and got hit behind the line of scrimmage. But like, let's see Isaiah Spiller have a full workload, and that's going to be hard because Austin Eckler is on an incentive based contract and he's going to want his carries. So are the Chargers offense going to do that to Austin Eckler? Probably not. Like, Austin Eckler deserves to get his carries and get his money because we know that he's not going to be on the team next year, and there's going to be a lot of players that are not on the team next year. And I'll talk about that when I in my closing. So offensively, I'd expect Easton Stick to play a lot of run pass option. Like I said before, he's very versatile. He's a good runner. He has 4.6 speed at the draft combine. And if you've seen him in the preseason, like he had one game where he had 70 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then with Kellen Moore's ability to play with backup quarterbacks, like we've seen what he did with Cooper Rush when he was over there with the Dallas Cowboys. I think he knows how to utilize players, and especially like Easton Stick, and play to his strength. So, like I said, a lot of run pass options, a lot of slant plays, and then I imagine that Easton Stick and QJ had probably developed a relationship, being that in mini camp and even in practice when QJ was on the bench, QJ probably got a lot of reps with Easton Stick. So I think I'd imagine they have some sort of a connection, and that's probably going to play a role in this game, and it's probably going to be a good look, right? I think QJ is going to have a solid game for us, and he's going to be the go-to guy, especially if Keenan Allen's not going to play, and what it's looking like is he's out. I don't think he has really any incentive to play through an injury, especially when our season's lost and when Justin Herbert's not playing the ball, right? But so offensively, hopefully we really utilize Isaiah Spiller, get him going, because I think he's going to be the only running back on contract that the Chargers have for next year. And then I'd also like to see, especially with Keenan Allen, if he's possibly out, we feature QJ and then Darius Davis in the receiving court. Uh, Now, defensively, or I should talk about the offensive line first. Like I mentioned earlier, the offensive line has been struggling in that pass blocking, whatever pass blocking scheme that Kellen Moore is playing. So Trey Pipkin is going to need a lot of help this week, especially going up against a Max Crosby. And then inside the line, Zion Johnson. The Raiders' defensive line is pretty decent. They have that rookie in Wilson on the other side, but if he lines up against Rashawn Slater, I expect Rashawn Slater to fully own that kid. So, but the real concern is going to be Max Crosby and Trey Pipkins matchup. So hopefully Kellen Moore is lining up a tight end and chipping him on every single play, because if not, he's going to have a huge day. Now, defensively, I think Dean Leonard is out, and he's the one who played real hard for us when we played against the Patriots. He was out last week against the Broncos. So Vato Davis is filling in, and he's going to be going up against Hunter Renfro and Devontae Adams. Every time, like I said, they're matched up with them. The Raiders, Devontae Adams and Hunter Renfro, kind of go off. So I mean, I don't see why that would change unless we could have another huge game from, I mean, guess who, right? Who always lights it up the stats when they play the Raiders? Who's always coming to town and getting sacks guaranteed? Like none other than Khalil Mack, right? If Khalil Mack has any resemblance of a game that he had earlier in the season, then Aiden O'Connell is also going to be in for a long day. I believe the Raiders' offensive tackle and center may be out for this game. So our defensive line, as far as pass rush goes, they're going to get after Aiden O'Connell, right? We have Thule, who had a great game against the Raiders earlier in the season. Khalil Mack, who's bound to get 3 sacks at least this game again. And then Morgan Fox, who's an excellent pass rusher. And I think our defensive line is going to probably be the difference in this game if we do end up winning, and they're going to force some turnovers. We have Alohi Gilman, who's a headhunter in the secondary, who I think is also going to have a big game because he just has a nose for the football. So if you could expect anything, and like I said, we talked about tanking this year, right? Tank mode, and not hoping for us to win, but not being too upset if we um, not hoping for us to lose, but also not being too upset if we lose, right? So if we have anything to root for, it's going to be for Khalil Mack, who deserves better, frankly, right? He deserves a better franchise, especially with the year he's having, um, putting up elite numbers. Hopefully, he gets to the sack record, right? So, like I said, if you want anything to root for Khalil Mack, and him breaking those records and being all pro, because this is likely going to be his last elite year. He is 32 years old, and there is such thing as a decline, in edge rushers. And maybe he won't be super big, but he's going to be more, possibly more of a role player, or he's probably. I hope we keep him after the end of the year, but I'm not too sure if that's going to happen or not. Um, So with that being said, I think in special teams wise, Digger the kicker is going to have a good game, and as well as um, J.K. Scott, who both played excellent the week prior to the Bronco game. Bronco game was just weird, if I'm being honest. Like it was just a weird game. Like Herbert was off the beginning of the game, then he got injured, and Brandon Staley lived up to his name, fourth and Staley, and went for it and didn't take any points. So I don't know what was going on in that game, but I'd expect somewhat better play from special teams this week, as well as some of our other players. Going into my scoring prediction, I do not think the Chargers are going to win this week. Am I hoping for it? Not really, but I think the Raiders come out with a win, 15-13, in what's going to be a probably a boring game, because I think defenses are going to play pretty well on both sides of the ball, just because of like the offenses that both the Raiders and the Chargers have, and then the quarterbacks that they have. Right. If anyone goes off, it's probably going to be Devontae Adams, and with Keenan Allen out and QJ and Darius Davis and Erickson being in, and the limited rotation that Joshua Palmer is going to be, it's going to be hard to get anything going on our offensive side of the ball. Um, so choosing the Raiders to win in this one, hopefully, and then that'll move us down as far as draft pick wise goes. And then just to address some rumors that we heard, with Bill Belichick, there was a rumor out there, or a report, that him and Robert Kraft had agreed to mutually part ways at the end of the season, after Week 10, when the Patriots played in Germany. So if that's any indication that he's going to be leaving and possibly be searching for a new home, I mean, there's limited coaching jobs for one, and there's even more limited franchises with a franchise quarterback, and like all the talent that we have on our roster. So if there's anything about Bill, like he's going to bring a top 10 defense to your organization, and he's going to maximize the potential, and maximize the roster that you have in your franchise anywhere he goes. I mean, that's what he's doing right now, with the New England Patriots, right? They have a lot of backup players on their defense, and they're absolutely killing it. Like it doesn't matter who they have. Somehow Bill just manages to scheme the right defense. And then I think the only thing to worry about with Bill Belichick is his drafting, and like the Bill Belichick as a GM, not very good. So hopefully, if he does end up coming to the Chargers, there's some evolution in Bill's management style, and maybe he lets someone else take hold of that GM. I would doubt it. And then just to go over it, like he's not my first choice. Like I wouldn't want Bill first choice. Would I be upset if he was our head coach? Absolutely not. I think he's obviously one of the greatest of all time. And if you're going to be competing in the AFC West, you're going to need that, especially with Sean Payton and Andy Reid. But my first choice would be Jim Harbaugh, and we'll discuss that in later podcasts once it gets closer to the end of the season and we find out more information, right? Um, but as always, this is the God of Thunder. Go ahead, shoot me a like, and also subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you have any positive criticism, go ahead, leave that in the comments. I'm always open to getting 1% better every single day. Um, and as always, I hope you guys have a fantastic Thursday game day. I'll be out at Raider Stadium So if you guys happen to see me, go and say what's up if you want to say hi or whatever. But if not, as always, bolt up, baby. I was given a list. I find nothing